Hello chess friends, and welcome to your Chess channel, and welcome back to the FTX Crypto Cup tournament in 2021. We're now in the super final between the two top grandmasters, Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So. So Magnus Carlsen, we have to agree, I think is always the favorite when it comes to every time format, whatever you play, blitz, bullet, or rapid, or maybe classical time format chess. It's of course always a pleasure to watch Magnus Carlsen. But on the other hand, I think Wesley So, when it comes to this online rapid chess, is also always the favorite, because recently Wesley So won 2 tournaments in this fast time format, and also got in the last tournament in the semifinals got kicked out by Magnus Carlsen, but also he won some other finals against Magnus Carlsen. So as I said, it's a really unexpected super final for me, because if this would be maybe a classical time format or something else, maybe some other players are much better, or they're simply feeling more comfortable in that format. But when it comes to, as I said, this online rapid chess, especially this online rapid chess, I think Wesley So is really one of the top favorites of every event. So let's check out now the game 1 of the first day. It was really an incredible game already, because if they will play such sharp openings like this, I think the viewers will be satisfied, because sometimes in the finals the players are trying to play more pragmatic chess, not to lose immediately some games. But here in the game 1 already a sharp opening has been chosen by Wesley So. So be prepared, really brilliant stuff already in the game 1 of the day 1. So let's check out now what happened here. Wesley So opened with the move e4, Magnus e5, knight to f3, knight to c6 by Magnus. After move bishop to c4, bishop to c5, we have now c3 by Wesley So, which is now the classical variation. The main goal of the Italian game, of the Gioco Piano game here that we have on the board, is of course the d4 pawn breakthrough. So that's why Magnus challenges now the pawn on e4 immediately. Here in the continuation, Wesley So plays now the center attack, c take with the move d4. We have e takes d4. After e5, here Magnus Carlsen plays the so-called Greco gambit. The Greco gambit is really wild, because you could play this one, you could maybe try e takes f6, but actually it's not so good here to play this line, because black can also take d takes c4, and you can get maybe one pawn here. But after rook to g8, if you try now, of course, here c takes d4, black can also recapture. And I think going into middle game with the bishop pair on the board, I think it's perfectly fine here for black. It's perfectly fine here for Magnus Carlsen. So I wanted to show one line that you should not basically go into this line as white now after bishop to e6, something like queen to d7, queenside castling. I think really that black could have a comfortable game. So that's why after the move d5, one of the most natural ways for white is to proceed here with the move bishop to b5. And maybe Wesley So should not have played maybe the sharp line in the beginning, because I think when it comes to surprising Magnus Carlsen, you should maybe try some other lines, maybe some other opening lines. But I think when it comes to the Spanish game, and especially in the Italian game, that Magnus Carlsen is so well prepared. He's really familiar with these great lines, with great possible sidelines of this opening, because his memory skills are really great. And I think when it comes to this classical opening, sort of, they are basically these classical openings, because these openings have been played in the 17th century. So I think Magnus Carlsen is really so familiar with the sidelines. So that's why if you want to surprise maybe Magnus Carlsen, you should choose, maybe try to play something else, maybe sort of a Trompovsky attack or something that's not played so often, I think. But now after move bishop to b5, basically Magnus plays now the best engine moves here. Knight to e4, the normal idea here. After c takes d4, okay, you have one tempo against the bishop here. Bishop to b6 played by Magnus, and now after move knight to c3 by Wesley So, here Magnus simply castles. And okay, when we evaluate now the position, the main strength of whites is the space advantage, and also the advanced pawn on e5. So this e5 is of course supported by the pawn on d4. But when we think about this position more, in order to prove your space advantage, I think white needs to do this. White needs to do something like, I don't know, maybe castling, then knight to e1, then f4 f5. If white manages to push somehow the pawn on f4 and f5, it's of course a great position. Then I think you could have a pure domination on the king side. But you have to always worry about your d4 pawn. So that's why this pawn on d4 is the main weakness now in Wesley So's position. So far this idea to go and expand on the king side, it's not so easy to make. You would love, of course, maybe black to wait to you play knight takes c3, then b takes c3, this would be then perfect for white. Then white could have a further pawn chain, the d4 would be protected by a pawn, and it would be a cool game here for white. But of course Magnus Carlsen is not reacting in this position like this. After move castling, bishop to e3, now a great move here, bishop to g4, because as we said, the main weakness is simply the d4 pawn. So here in the continuation we have queen to c2, getting out of this mess. Bishop takes f3 is not so good, I think. G takes f3, maybe knight to c3, b takes c3 again. We have now this very nice pawn chain. We can play now rook to g1, attacking the g file, and I think with the bishop pair, white should have here a pleasant game. Even queenside castling is, I think, here a possibility. Then simply play h4, h5, h6, and simply opening the position in front of black's king. So that's why after move queen to c2, here bishop to f5, played by Magnus Carlsen, gets the queen, chases the queen a little bit all over the board. Here in the game, queen to b3, and now knight to e7, played by Magnus. He wants now also to fix his pawn here, because d5 was now weak. The d5 was twice attacked, so that's why with c6 I think black would have a very nice and cemented position in the center. So knight to e7, we have castling played by Wesley So. Now c6, we have bishop to e2, rook to b8 by Magnus. We have knight to a4 attacking the bishop, and now bishop to c7. Look at this bishop pair now of Magnus Carlsen. It's very dangerous, because there is also now an opportunity to break and crack the position and open the position here on the Oxford with move f6. Although you are probably weakening the pawn structure in front of the king a little bit, there are maybe even some tactics if you play f6. Maybe there are some discovery possibilities here to attack the king, but so far the queen is only attacking this diagonal. You need further improvement. You need to include all of your pieces in the attack. So here so far a good setup by Magnus Carlsen. I think it's an equal game for both sides. So here knight to h4, chasing the bishop. We have now f6 by Magnus, risky choice, giving up the bishop pair. Knight to f5, here knight to f5. If you try maybe here now to play this idea, e takes f6, then knight to f6, and I think with this idea knight to d6 and then knight to e4, black could have a powerful control of the e4 square. So I think it's a pleasant game now suddenly for black, although white has the bishop pair, but even opportunities are here to take knight to e3, then after f takes e3, maybe white would continue then with the weak backward pawn. So these are the tiny little things that you have to take care of always, that you have to think of, I think, in the continuation of the middle game. Here in the continuation after here Magnus Carlsen's f6, Wesley So tried now to move bishop to f3, because you're probably very annoyed by this pawn on e4. This pawn is very active here. It controls the center of the board. Here in the continuation now b5 by Magnus, we have knight to c3, and now knight to c3 played by Wesley So, and Wesley plays now e takes f6. This was now the first sort of inaccuracy by Wesley So. A better idea is simply to take queen takes c3, and now if you take, that's the main issue. Probably Wesley So got annoyed because of this possibility to maybe be left with an isolated pawn on e5, but actually it's not such a bad pawn when we think about it harder, because first of all, what we can notice now that Magnus has also weakness. It's the weak backward pawn on c6, and still the problem I think for black is here that you cannot advance the pawn. You would love to play, of course, something like c5 and then maybe d4, then create a pawn storm on the queen side, but so far it's not possible because the bishop and the queen are controlling the square. Now even rook to d1 could be a possibility. Never allow here rook to d1, rook to c1, building such a maybe setup, and never ever allow black to push the pawn on c5, or here maybe this d pawn to d4. When that happens, I think then black could have a pleasant game, but with the blockade idea against these two advanced pawns, I think that white has a decent game. But Wesley So, as said, he didn't react correctly. He took, now of course he will recapture one of these pieces, but Magnus now simply plays bishop to e4. We have b takes c3, and now queen to d6 by Magnus Carlsen, already threatening checkmate, which is really wild. After move g3, here Magnus simply takes bishop to f3, and now bishop to f4, here attacking the queen on d6. We have queen to f6 by Magnus Carlsen. Here after move bishop to c7, here Magnus simply attacks also the bishop. We have bishop to e5 attacking the queen, and now queen to f7, and here knight to f3, queen to f3, and this is now an equal game for both sides. But I still kind of like now even more black's position. Why is that so? Because black in this particular continuation managed to trade off the light square bishop, which means now that white has several problems here on light squares, and the problem is now that this light square position, let's I wanted to maybe play setup here. If maybe something like, if you get some kind of a disposition, then it would be perfectly fine. If the king won't be on g2, then maybe with the move queen to d1 we could protect our life force. But now it's not the same position. I just played some dubious move just to show you what kind of a position it would be good here for white. But here after move, as we said, here after the move queen to f3, you see now that the king is really endangered. You don't have the square for the king. The king is really I think a little bit naked here now with h5, h4, h3 ideas. Black could cause many problems here on the king side, so that's why white needs now to play basically the best now accurate moves in the continuation of the game. Here Wesley So already plays again in accuracy, because you have to protect your light force. You have to understand now, I think, this position, the light force are the main weakness in white's position. Now Wesley So goes on the other side of the board, which he shouldn't have done. Maybe queen to d1, simply trying to trade off the queens. If that happens, maybe with this endgame with the bishop against the knight, I think white can simply hold the position and hope for a draw here. But again, as I said, queen to b4, the queen gets out. The queen is simply out of the game, and now is simply too far away from the action. You have to keep your queen on life force, and now Magnus simply includes now all of the pieces in the game. Knight to f5, and again the same, another mistake, queen to c5 again, simply queen to b3. You have to get your queen back. If now, for instance, something like h5 happens, then I think we can simply try here from white's perspective, queen to d1, and as I said, hope for the best. But here in the game, queen to c5, now the queen is simply too far away from the action. The queen is too tempi far away to get back to d1. So you see, again, you need I don't know, maybe queen to b4, then queen to b3, and then queen to d1. So 3 more moves in order to somehow challenge the queen on f3. The queen on f3 is now fixed, cannot be attacked anymore by any pieces. Now already a completely winning game here from Magnus. After move queen to c5, Magnus simply doubles up the rooks, and here Wesley So is trying the desperate move rook to e1, tries somehow maybe to kick away the queen. But the cool part of Magnus Carlsen setup is that the knight on f5 is protecting here the square e3, so the queen cannot be challenged here by the rook. So here h5, you see now this idea, Magnus is trying now to open the position. We have h3, h5, now queen to c6. It's now completely losing. The queen is again too far away. Magnus plays now brilliant sacrifice. Knight takes g3, bishop takes g3, h takes g3. Here rook to e8. Here Wesley So is trying to simplify the game by trading off more pieces. But now g2, great good move by Magnus Carlsen. Here rook to f8, rook takes f8, and in this position Wesley So resigns. So of course this is the main issue here. Rook to e1. If you move, then here rook to, queen to f2, and it's checkmate. So really brilliant stuff what Magnus did here. As I said, sometimes we underestimate, I think, our opponent's possibilities in the game. Queen to c5, the queen, as I said, simply too far away from the action. Wesley So probably hoped for some activities with the queen, maybe also attack the g7 pawn, but the rooks were simply inactive here. After the queen move, queen to f3, Magnus Carlsen had a brilliant idea. As we said, if the king would be here on g2, then the position could be protected, but now Wesley So got outplayed. Basically Wesley So beat himself here, I think, in the continuation of the tournament. Still Wesley, of course, has his chances, but he has to be careful, because Magnus will punish every tiny little inaccuracy in the continuation of the super match. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting stuff in the Italian game. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my so far covered games. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.